Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, live after MSU's thrilling 73-70 win over the Ole Miss Rebels in the Sweet 16. Now Michigan State advances to the Elite Eight to face the winner of Auburn, Michigan, which is going on while we're recording. I expect Rod will be a little distracted, perhaps, while we're doing this
That's
recording. Uh,
entirely possible.
I
Although
don't have a
it's probably not going to be the second half
right.
unless this
Uh,
goes way longer than I anticipate.
I don't have a
Um,
way of watching the game, so
so
which is probably a good thing. So I'm just going to rely on you, or just when I'll catch up later. So you want to mention a couple of numbers before we get going
I
here?
do. Before we get into the heart of this thing, because these are actually there's three that I want to mention. They don't mean a lot, but they do. They're indicative of some things. The first, that is you may have seen this flash on the screen after the game. This is the eighth time this year this Michigan State team has come back from a 10-point or greater deficit. I don't even know what the record is in or the number of wins rather in coming back from halftime deficits, but it's large.
Hmm.
Uh, that is incredibly impressive. When you and it's part of the reason why look, nobody likes to be down at halftime, right? Coaches
Except
don't,
this team.
players don't, fans especially don't. I
Yeah.
know my heart was in my throat for 2 hours in this game because there's so much at stake. We
Yeah.
all know you don't get to these games every year.
Hmm.
And we also know that Tom Izzo is closer to the end than the beginning.
Right.
So they're all it. I don't know how everybody else feels. I know that's how I feel. They're just this year, this run with this team for that reason, and also because they are so damn likable and so easy to root for. I always find it easy to root for Michigan State, obviously, but this is a different thing, and it
Right.
just brings. I feel as a fan, I feel a heightened importance even when I compare it to other NCAA tournament runs. it's
Hmm.
it's crazy, but that's how I feel. So anyway, that was the first number. The second number, and I think this is either at 28 or 29 now. When Michigan State wins the race to 69, they are
Yeah.
unbeaten. They did
Right.
it again in this game. Two things. One, I wasn't sure they were even going to get to 69
Didn't look
for
like it.
most of this game. And then I wasn't sure they were going to win that race because it was so tight. The last, whatever, I'd have to go back to check the transcript, but it seemed like the last 8 minutes or so of that game were right up until the very end were played in a one possession window.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Hmm.
just so tight. So you didn't know, well, these guys might actually get to 69 first. Didn't work out that way. MSU got there and they banked yet another win. They continue to be unbeaten in that way. And the other thing, which is something we should have noted in the preview, I'm kind of a little bit ashamed of myself that I didn't because I knew this. I didn't know the exact number, but I knew generally the implications of the stat. Tom Izzo is now 9-0 all time against the SEC in the NCAA tournament. Never lost to an SEC team. There's at least two wins over Kentucky in there.
Hmm.
Uh, there's two wins over Florida in that
Right.
batch. So it includes, I know there was one in an Elite Eight over Tennessee
He's
in
beaten Mississippi
2010.
before, I think 99, right?
That wasn't, oh yeah, right. That was a second round game in 1999. Exactly. So, um, you know, maybe that's something we'll bring up again, depending upon how the nightcap goes.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, but and Michigan State as a school is 12-1 all time. Do you know what the loss was? I do.
Well, it
I
had to have
remember
been
it
before
vividly.
Izzo, obviously. I'm trying. Oh, Georgia Tech. No, that's
Nope,
ACC.
they were an ACC team.
Yeah.
It was Kentucky in the Elite Eight in 1978, Irvin Johnson's freshman year. It was probably the worst game, definitely his worst game of the season, maybe the worst game of his career.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, not very many to choose from that would
Right.
fall into that category, but he really struggled that day. Kentucky was eventually the national champion, and Kentucky really won it on the backs of that Irvin struggled, and Kyle Macy, who was like their fifth option. had a huge, very important game shooting, and Kentucky barely edged out Michigan State. That's the only time the program has ever lost to an SEC team. And as you said, came before Izzo. So
Yeah.
anyway, those were the kind of the fun numbers since we're celebrating a win that I wanted to get out of the way off the top. And then we can get to the actual game, which was great. I think extremely well played and hotly contested, to say the least,
Hmm.
but not my idea of fun
Yeah,
until the end.
I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, so again, a big thank you to all our supporters who keep us on the air. If you'd like to join the Awesome Spartans, head on over to our support page. As always, the tffinots.com/support. You can get the links there. Also, our logo apparel, the stuff I'm wearing, like this hoodie right now, which is, of course, super comfortable because it's Nudge Printing and they have just awesome apparel. It's like the best. You can get that at Nudge Printing now at nudgeprinting.com/tffinots. You can also find a link on our support page, of course. Just click on the nudge. Okay, so Rod, so I think I finally pronounced the team dead about 3 times during that game, twice in the first half, once in the second.
You
So in
you
the second
needed
half,
that eight. You needed that 8-0. Well, it was 7-0 at that point when down 10 or more points stat.
yeah, well, maybe so, but I mean, when they went down 9 in the second half, I thought, well, they made that push, but with Padula playing the way he was, and they made that big push in the first half, but you say, well, he was on the bench, and so that's why they caught him. So just like the other two NCAA games, the Spartans trailed early by sizable amounts. And despite trying a new lineup to try and get a better start, they didn't
Yeah.
have Zapala. He didn't play a minute in this game. Carr replaced him there. But despite that, they still found themselves down 2, trailing at halftime, which was fortunate because they were down a few minutes before that. Almost, I think that was a 10-point
Two
deficit.
two big threes, right?
Yep.
Jace and Jaden
Yeah.
were the difference there.
So the second half started pretty well, but Padula continued just hot shooting, pushed the lead back out to 9, and then the Spartans really just put the screws on Ole Miss on the defensive end and started successfully driving the ball. That was really the big difference in that when they finally got through that cold bit. They took the lead. The game was kind of right there for anybody at the end of the game, and it was really free throw shooting at the end, clutch shooting by Michigan State, a couple of big baskets. Cooper with that big basket to take the lead by 2, and then they got the stop. And as you mentioned, once again, Michigan State hits the magic number 69. Then they're the first one there, so they won the game. So I guess where would you like to start? You kind of already threw some numbers out initially, but
Yeah, but none
a
of
great
I
game,
mean,
right?
yeah, look,
They're good when you win.
it has to be said that Ole Miss team. Izzo said it, and I'm sure he's going to elaborate in the post game. That he said was the toughest team he's played in several years. He might even say since Chris Beard's Texas Tech team in 2019. And I don't know if I would quite go there. I'd have to think about it. But man, is that team tough. Some of the things we talked about that we thought would be automatics happened.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them didn't.
Yes.
And the one that didn't, which was rebounding, I give that team unreal amounts of credit because that was not fluky. Now, we can critique Michigan State. I happen to think part of it was the way Ole Miss defends kept Michigan State on the perimeter for so much of that game. Now, late, it changed. But for so much of that game, Michigan State was really on the perimeter. And so they just didn't have the number of bodies at the basket that we normally see. But be that as it may, Ole Miss competed. Both ends, they competed. And if you had told me before the game, not only is Ole Miss going to hold their own, they're going to win the rebounding battle. Cleanly, they're going to win it. I would not have believed it.
Right.
Not a chance in hell would I believe that. They had a season's worth of performances that suggested that had no chance of happening. And Michigan State had a season's worth. Why did it happen? Well, I mentioned one kind of, I won't say strategic, but something about the way that the game unfolded that contributed to it. But look, the biggest thing is those were some tough guys that just competed their asses off.
Yeah.
And you got to give them credit for that. And in terms of their pressure, the way they defended on the perimeter, that was as advertised.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a
they're
tough team.
forcing
And
steals.
yeah, and Padula,
Yeah.
that kid,
Well,
you really, he's this is too high of praise, but I'm going to say it anyway. A little bit of Scott Skiles in him, which is an easy comparison to make when you're talking about an undersized, not super athletic white guard, right?
Yeah.
But he does. That kid has some cockiness to him, and I mean that as a compliment. I don't think he was over the top, but he brings it, and he brought it in this game. And honestly, I might be inclined to say, you kind of talked about it a second ago. I might be inclined to say that one of the biggest facets of this game was him getting that second foul and having to sit so much of that half. Now, his team played very well without him.
Yeah, I wouldn't have brought him in
right
either.
up until the last minute. So it's this counterfactual discussion.
Right.
You'll never resolve, but I can understand someone wondering how much would they have been up if he had been brought back in. Now the risk is he gets his third, and that's the thing. I don't know how hard you can come at Chris Beard for that, because Ole Miss, as we saw, one thing that did hold up, they foul a lot.
Yeah.
And it's a function of their hyper aggressive defensive play primarily, but they foul a lot. And Padula fouls a lot. He's trying to create havoc defensively. You can sit on the comfort of your couch or your lounge chair or wherever you're watching this from and say, well, it's real simple. You just tell the kid you got 2 fouls. You can't take chances. You're dealing with, in his case, a 20-something-year-old, but still a young person.
But also just not the way you've been playing all season.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
how can you maybe with someone who's like an 8-year NBA vet, you could say, look, you know what kind of situation you're in. You got to cool it. You can't. Discretion is the better part of valor, right? And maybe that happens. Doesn't even always work in the NBA. But here, I would not feel entirely comfortable doing that. The other end of it is people could say, hey, you were up whatever it was, 8-10 late in that half, and then you gave it back. If Padula had been in there, maybe you're up 16,
maybe
18. And maybe that's true. We'll never know. But regardless, I do think that was an important factor, because it's two ways. One negative, which is obvious, and one maybe positive that isn't as obvious. The negative one for them, obviously, is he wasn't out there, as we've been talking about. I will say one thing that I think may have worked out positively. Because he sat all those minutes, Michigan State didn't really wear him down. If he had played you know what I mean? And the way the game unfolded, if I'm Chris Beard, I'm happy that I've got Padula with something closer to a full tank of gas, you know? So again, we could debate these things till the cows come home. We'll never know the answer, but those were some interesting components. But that is a tough team that I think played extremely well and pushed MSU every inch, every step of the way. And in the end, I think Michigan State won that game because every big play that needed to be made got made. Every single one.
Yeah.
Every free throw, every drive to the bucket and conversion at the rim, every play at winning time got made. And they needed every single one of them.
Yeah, it's I think it was it was telling, and I always think we've seen this now the last 2 games. You've had the seniors, well, Holloman's not a senior, but he's certainly one of the veteran leaders of the team. You've had Holloman and Akins out there at the end of the game, but at various points of the game also being the senior leaders that you'd expected them to be. Akins has not really been that most of this year, right? I mean, like, you look at the box score, and certainly Jace Richardson is the one that carried this team offensively for a large portion of the game, but Akins getting the buckets when he needed to, and
hitting free throws,
hitting free throws, and Holloman, of course, just ice in his veins, free throws. Those players have come through, and it's really nice to see for Jaden, because I know it means so much to him. He never won a Big Ten title until this year, made it to the Sweet 16, but never beyond. And this senior season could not have really gone much worse for him, in the sense that I think what he expected was, hoping for. He was certainly not hoping to shoot sub 30%.
As an individual.
As an individual. I'm just talking about his individual season. I mean, I'm sure he's absolutely
And I
thrilled.
don't think I don't think
They
that's
are.
entirely true, but I know what you're getting at. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to see him have good games in the tournament, like, impactful and
Yep.
not like you're cringing that he's just goes, 1 for 10 or something from the field. I guess he was 2 for 10 that first game against Bryant, but it didn't matter. But anyway, just efficient play, and he's playing to his strengths a lot of times. Not taking. He's able to drive and finish. He's really good finishing at the rim. I mean, I think and you saw. I mean, he's probably well, I guess Richardson, I suppose you'd say is a little bit better, but Jaden can really finish great, especially in the break and stuff. So I don't know. Uh,
I, I
why don't
had
you?
the thought, I had the thought while watching him step up, make those plays, getting to the rim and converting in traffic, hitting free throws when it matters most, that he was playing like a guy who's not ready for it to be over. And you do
Right.
usually need that
Hmm.
somewhere along the line. You look at his numbers, okay, the 3-point shooting wasn't where you wanted it. Where he would want it. He's 1 for 5, but he was 4 for 5 on twos,
Right.
big time, big time. And he was a huge part. He wasn't alone. Basically, all the guards were doing it, but he was a huge part of Michigan State in the second half. I would say actually the last 10 minutes, as much
Hmm.
as anything else, getting downhill and taking it to that team, which is what was missing through large portions of the first half, right? Where I mentioned it earlier, they were so much stuck on the perimeter because of the way that team defends. And
Right.
then they finally figured it out that, hey, we got to get downhill. It was something we talked about in the pregame. I think they knew it all along, but they finally started doing it. And
Yeah.
that was the difference. And Jaden was a huge part of that. He had the last make from the floor that he had, which to me looked like it could have been an and one, where he got in the middle of the lane and kind of threw it up there and it hit back iron and rolled in, was such a senior not ready to be done kind of bucket.
Yes.
Um, just yeah, I mean, the whole team just clutch, delivering when it counts. And if you're gonna try and win a championship, be that a regional or the whole deal, it's pretty simple. When it matters, when it's winning time, because from this point forward, I know we haven't had much of this in this tournament thus far. This was actually one of the, I think, highlight games of the whole tournament so far, because most
Yeah.
of them haven't really been that competitive. But you would expect from here on out, because of the quality of the teams that are left, that you would think we're going to see games like this one, at least more
Yeah.
frequently than we have to date. And so if you're going to win those games, man, it's making clutch plays when they matter and your seniors being a big part of that.
Yeah.
And MSU they only played two of their seniors. You mentioned Zapala didn't see the floor at all. Uh, and and both of them, Frankie Fiddler had some really nice conversions at the rim in
He's
this
really
game.
cycled
So
up these last few games.
he
Like, I mean,
has.
he looks. I mean, he was trending in the right direction at the end of the season, where he started looking more comfortable. I think you pointed way back when he hit that transition three or something.
Yep.
Was it? I don't remember what game that was, but you're like, okay, I think he's gonna be okay. He missed his three tonight, but
It felt like
definitely,
that might be the shot that kind of unlocks
yeah,
him
just
and just gets him to
exactly.
relax.
Yeah, and he just seems much more comfortable, knows who he is, what he can do.
Yeah, I mean,
And that one drive he had where he kind of switched dribbles to avoid the steal and then just laid it in. I mean, that was really impressive. That was a high level
yep,
drive to the
that's the
basket.
one I'm thinking of. But yeah, just I mean, I am going to once we're done here. We're doing this obviously, and I'm too amped up otherwise to do it. But I do want to go back at that transcript and see Michigan State's efficiency over the last 4 or 5 minutes,
Well,
because it seemed to me like they didn't fail to score.
we've had a ton of comments. So one of the chats, Jim McKay mentioned this final 12 minutes, Michigan State shot 78% from the
There
floor
you
and
go.
outscored Mississippi 34-22. I mean,
Yep,
I don't know if that's accurate, but it seems right
sounds right.
because they were down 9 and they came back and they won by,
It certainly
3.
sounds right. And again, even though they only played 8 in this game, was that strength in numbers? Was that wearing an opponent down. Well, they were +5 in the
Hmm.
second half, and truthfully, +8 because the
Yeah, right.
last,
Yeah.
so you can say that. It didn't seem to me like Mississippi was making, a lot of these games, we see plays being made from the opponent where you can tell,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
they're tired. They're
Tank's
front,
empty
they're
or something.
front
Yeah.
rimming jumpers. They're not competing well enough to get to loose balls. MSU starts winning all the 50-50s. I actually want to point to a huge play. We've talked about some of the other guards, and we really haven't talked about Jeremy Fears yet.
Hmm.
There was a play when MSU was down 61-59, and MSU was either a missed shot or a turnover. I can't remember which. And Padula had the ball.
Oh yeah,
It was
Jeremy's
starting to
deflection.
break. Jeremy Fears at half court goes up and extends to reject the pass. Cohen Carr scoops it up, dunks, tie game. And Michigan State, I do not believe, trailed after that. I don't think so.
That was a
Um,
loud play on Cohn's card, but I think the to your point too is that that leap by Jeremy. I mean, he got way off the floor. Like that. I think that his thigh's okay.
Yeah, well, he's done. I mean, he's had some even in this tournament. I think I can't remember whether it was the Bryant game or New Mexico where he got up on a shot rejection at the rim. That that he has that gear. There's no doubt about that. And it's if it's not 100% back, it's pretty damn close. But yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that was in my mind a huge play at a point in this game where it seemed the importance of every single possession was so huge because neither one of them could get that push to extend it even to a two possession lead. Like MSU, I think had a stretch there. Actually, I am I right about this? Was it there was a point where they finally had a 4-point lead and Padula came right down and hit a three.
Yes. Yep.
And
Because we are real
you're
excited.
shaking your head like, God, you can't shake these guys.
I
That's what
know.
I mean. I all due credit to that team because they pushed Michigan State every step of the way, and it's unfortunate for them that they had to lose because that is a team that played an Elite Eight caliber brand of basketball, at least in this game. And truthfully, you got to say the whole tournament because their first two games, I know they gave up leads in the second half and made them a little tighter than they actually were, but that was that was a team that was playing very, very well
It may
at
just
this time
remind
of
you
year.
of that Kansas State game 2 years ago. I mean, it was high level play. Both teams played well at the end. It was, close game
Yeah,
right to the end, and someone has to lose, which is kind of unfortunate
different
sometimes.
different nature of game,
Hmm.
of course, because that one was just offensive fireworks
Yes,
like
right,
the whole way. This one had very good offense late. For
right.
most of that game, I would say it was the defenses that were winning, and it was
Absolutely.
not bad offense. It was really good defense both ways. But yeah, you're right in terms of facing an opponent that was at or near their top capability. Definitely the case for Kansas State in that one, and I would say the case for Ole Miss today. Just
What do
Michigan
you
State just had a little extra.
what do you make of Concar's start? I mean, I don't think we see this going forward. I mean, it depends who they end up playing in the next round, but
I don't think it
I
does
think it was a
depend.
it was a matchup
I don't think
dependent
we'll see it against
switch.
either of these teams.
Were you
No.
surprised they didn't try Zapala even for a few minutes, or do you think that's
Yeah,
just the way it was just going to go?
yeah.
That they just because I feel like that really affected Jackson Kohler's rebounding ability. The fact I think he rebounds better as a four, just because of the matchups and the ability versus
You got a
having him as a
point.
five.
And in this game, he would have had a distinct size advantage at the four
Hmm.
that he did not have at the five. He's basically the same size as their five man. You got a point there. I was surprised. I had seen people suggest it. Hats off if you were one of the people who suggested it. And I may have responded that I didn't think it was going to happen. I think that it was probably two things if I had to guess. It was matchup oriented. Clearly, they felt and we had the basics of this right. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't like we thought Jamon was going to play, 15 minutes in
no,
this one.
we thought
We
Carr was going to play a
knew
lot.
that this was not a Zapala game. We said as
Right.
much.
Hmm.
But I did think he would start because that's just, the habit. That's what Michigan State does. And I didn't think they would make them, they said, CBS said leading into it that, wow, big risk, changing your
Right.
starting lineup in a Sweet 16 game. And it's unconventional. But I think he did it first and maybe primarily because of the matchups. That this is a team that goes small at the four. I think he didn't feel he could run and also even besides the four, that's the thing that people focused on most. But the other part of it is, as we saw in this game, their 5-man is a stretch. Like he can play on the perimeter, and that's not Zapala's strength. Getting
Right.
out to, you're better off with Coop or Kohler doing that. So it was that. But then the other thing is, I have to admit, even though I didn't think they would do it, I also think part of this was probably him trying to solve this getting off to sluggish starts thing. And on that front, it didn't really work.
No, I mean they
But
started with a turnover again. I feel like every game this tournament they've started their first
yeah,
possession with a turnover, and
I
this
don't
one
know
was
what
like a
it
bizarre
is.
one. Yeah, I mean, Jeremy
Well,
six assists, just 3 turnovers. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure. We know Zapala's going to play a lot next game,
yes,
but
we're going to
the
be
turnover thing
back. We're going to be
is a
back.
mess.
Yeah, we're going to be back no matter, in my opinion, no matter which one of these teams wins,
Yeah.
because they both go Twin Towers.
Well, and if it's Michigan, that's the lineup that beat them last time twice. So
Twice.
why would you
But
switch
but
away?
but either way, even it's true for Auburn as well.
Yeah.
Like either of these opponents will, in that sense, be more conventional, and that will allow Michigan State to do what they normally do. And obviously tonight proves I could certainly be wrong on this stuff. I like to think I'm dialed in a little bit to the way they think, but um, I would be kind of surprised if we don't go back. Now, that said, you could focus on the fact that Cohen Carr played a great game.
Yeah.
So in part, it worked for him, right? I mean, it wasn't he did get a bucket early. He had their second bucket of the game, I think,
I
second
think
or
that's right.
first. Yeah, and that got him started, and then he kept rolling from there. I believe was their second leading scorer tonight. But yeah, you can't say that it was a success story in terms of its impact on Michigan State. Definitely surprising though, and just as a capper to that, a rebuttal to the Izzo is stubborn, never changes what he does crowd.
I mean,
Um,
the guy
he gave you
acts,
what you wanted, people.
I will say this about Izzo, and this is not related to the coaching aspect of it, but maybe just a little bit. I think he is sort of an act, and he sort of is a caricature, makes a caricature of himself. Like he embraces the curmudgeon sort of
Yes,
stodgy, unchanging person.
yes,
I think in a way for people to underestimate him, and I think I can't remember who I was
maybe.
listening to, but someone was talking about sort of the smoke and mirrors of Izzo, and I can't remember who it was, but don't think he's just like run, run, run. He's all about running. They're like, yes, he is absolutely about running for about 5 seconds. And then it's slow down, get a nice shot in the half court. So that was Greg Campy saying that this is all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah,
Like he tries to tell you one thing. And I mean, he clearly does. Like the team absolutely runs,
I
right?
think
They try
that's
and score in
true.
transition, but when it's not there, they don't continue to just increase, push the
It's
tempo when they're in the half court.
yes,
They move back into like second gear, and we're going to slow down and get a good shot. And I think that is a good way. But that just goes to the point. I think Izzo enjoys being misunderstood and being and he just kind of enjoys the sort of this sort of persona that's been sort of built up in the media, and he just kind of just embraces it. I think.
I think you're right. I do. I think it's a really good point, and it's something that doesn't get discussed very often. It would make a lot of sense that somebody like Greg Campy, who, as a coach and also a coach who's very close to him, would make that point. And because he sees things through a different lens than any of the rest of us do.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, Look, you can't, I think there's this cliche that Michigan State is this blood and guts and football on the hardwood and all of that stuff, which has gone on for decades. in terms of the public discourse. And it even extends I saw ESPN's supposed NBA draft expert repeat a line that I just love because it is so counterfactual, but it gets repeated over the years by idiots. That, well, Jace Richardson is this anomaly because, Tom Izzo doesn't typically like to play freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
I'd lose count real quick the number of freshmen who have started and played significant roles for this program. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But he's not the guy going get the one and dones, right? I mean, that's the thing. They look at the one and dones like, oh, well, he doesn't get those guys. But that's the different thing.
But that's the other thing is some of those freshmen that he played a lot were good enough to be one and dones, but decided to come back anyway. I can think of two in Gary Harris and Miles Bridges for starters. And Jaren Jackson would have too if they would have let him, from what he says.
And which goes against all those people who say, Izzo's always trying to trick his players, saying, like, you told the guy to leave.
Yes, it's just, but that's deluded 14 Michigan fans talk,
right?
Primarily. The bottom line is, I think you are correct that he has created this persona that there is. So, like, for example, when we say, oh, blood and guts and, football on the hardwood, there are some truths to that.
Sure. He likes toughness.
Yeah. Michigan State is about toughness, but it's not just that.
No, I know. Yeah.
It's never been just that.
And
he couldn't win if it was just that.
Right. And they have all kinds of times people talk about how he's, doesn't adapt from his offense, and it's kind of a stodgy offense. But I mean, look at just the 2019 team versus this team. They play offense entirely differently. Like, this is a team that runs all the time, much more. They don't run it's not a pick and roll only sort of offense. Now, it's different players, but I mean, it's like there are elements that are the same, but of course, there always going to be elements that are somewhat similar for most teams.
The old cliche used to be, and again, there was some truth to it. At certain points in his career, Izzo was very definitely ran a set heavy offense. This team this year is primarily running ball screen continuity. I'm not going to say exclusively because there are sets they run, but they're playing ball screen continuity, which is basically, I think it would be fair to describe it as almost a motion offense. Yeah. It's definitely not a scripted offense. It is not one where it's, okay, 5-man goes here, screens the 4-man's guy, we kick it to the corner and we get an open. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's a very modern offensive approach that many programs run, including some who get lauded as being genius level.
Innovative, yeah.
And that Michigan State has an offense, does exactly the same things, and is more efficient than many of them. But
I mean, you can look at Michigan State. Yeah, and you can look at Michigan State and say there are some things that are absolutely the same from you. The way they defend is pretty much always the same. They don't, they're not
principles are the same.
Zones.
But I
his
will
offense
tell you,
evolves with his personnel, and I mean his defense is too in some respects too, right?
That's another area though. If you're looking over the breadth of his career and you don't think he's adjusted, Michigan State for years and years and years was a defensive team whose whole MO was, we are going to make you take shots you don't want to take. We're going to generally make you use a lot of clock in order to get those shots. And we're going to rebound the ball defensively. What we're not going to do is take any risks. Now that
blocks are, right.
Well, with steals, which continues to this day primarily, they don't gamble, they don't pressure, and blocks. They were notoriously a program. I mean, I can remember even as it's not that far back when they faced UConn in the Final Four in 09. The contrast between this UConn team, and Jim Calhoun was a great defensive coach too, but they had totally different philosophies. UConn always had a 7-footer in the middle, and they were always a team that was dependent upon shot blocking. That was their whole deal, to protect the rim. Michigan State, polar opposite. Well, you know what changed about 8-9 years ago? Because the rules changed. All of a sudden, you've got freedom of movement coming in, which is
Right.
encouraging teams to look to have their guards in particular get to the basket at all costs. And Izzo, of course, moved with the times and realized gotta have rim protection. And since then, Michigan State has generally been an extremely high level rim protection team, as they are this year. They block a
Yeah.
ton of shots.
All right. Well, let's move on to. Well, I don't know if you looked at the weather reports, but I have, and it's going to rain 6 in the next 7 days here in Mitch. We've gone from. We've definitely officially entered spring. Unfortunately, today was like the best day. It was like 70 degrees here in West Michigan. I think it's going to get down. I think the one day it's not going to rain is going to be 43 degrees next week. So, but that means it's a wet season. Make sure you get your gutters functioning properly, folks. And the Brothers Adjusted Gutters are the ones to call. They are located on the west side and the east side of the state. As a listener of the show, you get 10% off if you just mention Final Four when you get your gutter work done. Whether it's just repairing them, replacing them, maybe just get them cleaned out, putting some leaf guards on so you don't have to climb on the ladders anymore. Whatever you need done, Brothers Adjusted Gutters can do that for you. You can find ways to contact them at our support page at the Final Four on the schedule.com/support. And so the player Michigan State needed to keep in the gutter was Sean Pudula. Well, we kind of already been sort of giving this away. He was not kept in the gutter today. He was 9 for 17 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3, 2 for 2 from the line, finished with 24 points, had 3 rebounds, one of them offensive, which was that very end of the that last possession. I think that may have been the last bucket before they hit that 3, that kind of meaningless 3. He had 4 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 steals. He's probably the first guard, like true guard we've seen that has been able to be real effective against Michigan State. Partly he's not like a Tominaga but he's definitely a guy who doesn't need much of a window, and he's able to make just a tiny bit of space is all he needs in order to get a shot off. And so that's really hard to defend. And you saw that when they got weird switches like Cooper and Fiddler on that one timeout. And he just, you've got to have really good communication with that guy, but he was very good, and he was absolutely not kept in the gutter by Michigan State.
The only thing that really limited him was the foul trouble.
Exactly. They're
in the
lucky.
first half. When he was on the floor, he was dangerous and he was efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed. And you're absolutely right about his ability to get his shot off. And it's not like Tominaga, because every one of the shots he took were ones that they felt rhythmic to me.
Yeah.
It's just that he's got an incredibly quick release. And, the old cliche is when you're defending a shooter, you need to be there on the catch, right? It's not enough to, you need to be there before he can get up into his shooting motion. It's not enough to just guard the shot, because the idea is you want to make it so the shot doesn't even get taken, right?
Right.
Or if it does, it's just a ridiculously difficult shot over a strong contest. The problem with him is that the amount of time between the catch and the shot going up is like a millisecond. It's just, you saw him do that on some of those screens where they'd hand the ball off to him, bam, he's into the shooting motion. Yeah. And there's just no, if you're even that just slightly lagged bit of time behind him, that's enough. And he hits them. So, yeah, it's the first time this year that, well, I guess I can't say that definitively. I'd have to go back and think about it a little harder.
It's been a while, let's say.
But if I think about the losses, the Memphis game, Memphis's guards really gave Michigan State a hard time. I don't remember who we had. It might have been Hunter, and I know Haggerty is the guy who really torched him in that game. So we might not have had the right guy, but still, that guy really killed MSU.
Yeah.
I think about those other games. We probably had Desmond Claude in the USC game, and he was their best player in that game. So maybe it's happened once or twice, but generally speaking, when the guy we have in this category is the point guard, he might get some numbers, but he's going to do so very inefficiently. And Michigan State is likely going to wear him down. As I alluded to a while ago, I think in one sense that foul trouble in the first half helped, because Padula was not worn down late in the game.
Right.
And we've seen that movie over and over and over this year, where at winning time, the other team's point guard has just about had enough of the steady diet of Fears and Holloman and Akins and Richardson just wearing on them over 40 minutes. And they don't have enough in the tank to get to the finish line. That wasn't a problem in this game, but yeah, because Padula, in part because he sat, but he was really, really good. I mean,
Well, and
there's no
I
two
feel like
ways about it.
the way he plays too, he's not as ball dominant point guard as you see other places, like a Braden Smith, where he's got the ball for, 12 to 13 seconds of a 30-second shot clock. Padula would have it just for a little bit and then give it up because he's looking for his shot coming off screens as much as he
Yeah.
is looking to facilitate. Probably more so, actually, in some ways. He's almost
Well,
like a point guard who sets up his own offense later.
what helps is that they have Murray out there as well,
Yeah.
who is actually, as we talked about in the pregame, is more efficient. He's just behind Padula as a playmaker. I think there's like a 10 assist gap between the two of them, but Padula is like almost right at a 2-to-1 ratio, and Murray's at like a 3-to-1. So
Yeah.
they can put the ball in Murray's hands a lot, and they do that. So you're right. I think that does help him as a scorer, that there's not as much on his plate as a Braden Smith or a Shellstead. Some of the guys
Yeah.
we've seen in the Big Ten who are ball dominant at a necessity.
All right. So now we get to Who Cleans the Glass Best, brought to you by the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Friends, if you need your windows cleaned, no better people to call than the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Again, the region is much larger than Grand Rapids. If you're Grand Rapids adjacent, sort of like gutter adjacent, if you're Grand Rapids adjacent, you can contact the Squeegee Squad. They'll come on out, take care of your windows, power wash your house, maybe your business. If you got a high rise or you've got like apartment building or something like that, they can take care of that as well. Whatever you need done, they can do the job. They've taken care of the state capitol for their windows. And I don't know how many windows are in the state capitol, but there are a lot. So they can do that job. They can obviously take care of you. Great pricing, the nicest professional people. They'll come in, do the inside, outside windows, whatever you need done. 15% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate. And you can do that, of course, at the Final Fours on the schedule.com/support, our support page. All right. Well, it was bound to happen. So here it goes. It's much better doing this in a game that Michigan State had happened to win. So I told you that I'd have to wear the basketball on my head. People wondered what I was talking about. This I picked up at the Big Ten tournament. It is really hard to read with this, but I can. Oh, I got it lined up now. I'm all six eyes here. So I had Kohler and Richardson. They ended with 6 rebounds. Kohler just with 2. Richardson with 6. You had Cooper and Carr with 7 and 3 for 10. So, I mean, you already had 1 pretty much for the year. You're now up 6 with hopefully 3 games to go. I don't know what more to say about this except we'll get into the keys.
We'll get into it in the keys.
But I think it was interesting that I don't know why Carr had so much trouble. Or not Carr, but Kohler. I don't know how many minutes he played, and
18.
I can't possibly 18 minutes. That should be enough that he's going to get more than 2 rebounds. He just he struggled on the offensive end, and I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm not overly worried about it because with Jax, as Izzo says, never has a bad day in practice. It was just one of those things. Here's where I was disappointed with him, and this gets us away, or with Michigan State. This gets away from the rebounding thing. In the first half, it was less of an issue in the second half because Michigan State finally started to get downhill with their guards. But in the first half, there were several times where Michigan State, and we talked about how Ole Miss switches 1 through 5. They just with impunity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there were many possessions in that first half where they were guarding Cooper or Kohler with, Murray or Padula.
Right.
And Michigan State struggled to even get those guys. And I say this all the time. The biggest difference, in my opinion, in quality, besides general shot making ability between the NBA and college, is in college, you see teams really struggle to exploit mismatches. In the NBA, they never miss.
Yeah.
If they see a physical mismatch, they are going to it. And we didn't see MSU. Coop, I understand. There was one possession where they got him the ball in a post up against a much smaller defender. I don't remember which one it was. And he blew like a 5-footer.
Oh
And
yeah.
he looked really uncomfortable. And I get that. You're not used to that as a big man. You're not you, and you might think, well, it's easy. You're just, you're that much bigger than the guy who's guarding you. But if you never do it, it can make you feel awkward, at least on a given possession, until you get comfortable, right?
Right.
But I had thought, man, Jax will be better at that. And it just never happened. He didn't score in this game. He had 2 rebounds, as you said, but he also didn't score. And it just did not happen for him. It's disappointing, but again, I'm not overly worried about it because that kid works. That kid plays with so much heart and energy and toughness that I'm comfortable he's going to respond. He's going to answer the bell no matter which team they're facing on Sunday.
Yeah, he's also junior, and I think again these matchups are kind of tough on these smaller teams. I think when he's back to his normal role at the 4, I think he's going to be more comfortable and without a super athletic.
Yes, I agree. It's going to be
I
much more natural in the next game, no matter who they're facing.
Right, and I do think the one thing, and this is something about Cooper certainly, but also Kohler more so just because they do try post him up, and I mean he's got great footwork, and we've talked about that a number of times. But you almost he just needs to go a little bit faster in some respects, right? Like I think he waits almost so long that it forces a double team to come down on him, and then he gets uncomfortable, and this is probably also with the NBA you probably can't do that as easily because if you come off a shooter you're just going to give up 3 points, so you're not going to double on those guys as much, and so that maybe one of the aspects of the game too.
And there's just not as much pure post play in the NBA either. It's,
right.
Kind of falling by the boards. So anyway.
Speaking of boards, we get off the rebounds. We're talking about Nudge Printing. So Nudge Printing, a great sponsor of the show. I'm obviously wearing their gear. You can get our apparel now if you just go over to nudgeprinting.com/TFFINOTS. And you get right to your page. You can order all the stuff. You can also order anything else at Nudge. You can order it all at the same time. Obviously, your contest wins. All the gifts are Nudge Printing gift cards because they just have really awesome stuff. And I'm actually looking forward to getting a couple more things. Like I said, I wanted the reverse. So we actually now have a white with a green logo. So if you've got a whiteout or something like that, you can still wear our stuff. I know that's been a struggle for me why it took me a whole year to come up with that idea. I don't know. So you can get that. They also have really cool stuff. They have some retro Michigan State basketball stuff. So they got the ones that the coaches are wearing with the I don't know what you call it, like the Sparty, he's dribble, basketball Sparty.
The cartoon Sparty.
Yeah, I mean the one that's the current one,
yes.
where he's those quarter zips and stuff, and so that with the Kelly Green is they're really sharp. Those are really cool. But they also have this retro T-shirt celebrating 27 years of Izzo. It's like this basketball head playing basketball.
Yeah, it's a brand new one.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They also have really cool hats and stuff. So head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. And as a listener to the show, of course, you get 20% off your order if you type in Final Four, just as one word at checkout. Do it today. You'll be glad you did. Super fantastic stuff. All right, so let's dig into the keys of the game. First key to the game is handling the pressure. I guess you could say they did okay. They had 10 turnovers, 8 of them compared to 8 for Mississippi. So not a huge edge there. Points off turnovers, it was 10-13 with a little edge for Mississippi. So pretty much a push there. Of course, again, it was mostly turnover problem in the first half. And the first half of the first half, it just seems like they just kind of get in this, they just have trouble getting going recently. It's not like it was a problem all season. It's just like the last, I don't know, what do you want to say, half dozen games or something like that? But certainly in the tournament, I think every possession they've had turnover. Today was an inexplicable one by Jeremy. He just like fell over. It was just weird.
For as weird and unforeseen as I think the rebounding situation was, which we'll talk about in a minute, this one, if you would have told me 10-8 in turnovers, they have 13 points off MSU's turnovers, we get 10 off theirs, I would have taken that and run with it.
Yeah, right.
Because 10 turnovers is not the number that Ole Miss wanted to get to. Now, we're going to flip this around when we talk about rebounding.
Yeah.
But in this area, which goes to show you, man, you can look at a season's worth of stats and everything and watch the games and see it all. But in a one and done format, if we were talking a 7-game series, I would be very confident in saying that I think Michigan State eventually would dominate the boards and Ole Miss would get more done with its pressure defense. And we'd see which way that would turn out. But in a one game scenario, just with college
Well,
kids, you just never know. And so it's a huge deal given how this particular game unfolded that Michigan State really largely did the job. They, as you say, in the early going, they struggled. And that's a pattern we've seen recently with
yeah.
batches of turnovers early.
Hmm.
It's clearly contributing to their slow starts, no doubt about
Yep.
any of that. But I think when you look at the totality of this game, that might be an under discussed element of it. That Michigan State, one of the reasons they were able to win is they weren't in trouble in terms of ball security.
Yeah. It
They
turns out you can't
also,
score
by
when
the
you don't
way,
have, we don't take shots.
they also, by the way, did a great job late. That's where you
Yeah.
worry about, and we've seen that. You see that from great
Oh,
teams from time
of
to time.
course. Yeah.
Seen it in
Right.
this tournament where a team struggles with pressure in late game situations where they're up and you just got to inbound. That's the thing we talk about the clutch free throw shooting, which we'll return to. And that's, of course, massive. But you know what's got to come before that? Got to get the ball in bounds.
Right. Yeah.
And
Oh, I
they
know. We were thinking
did,
about that.
they did a great job in that respect.
Yeah.
So I think this was very definitely, I take it as a win for Michigan State because coming in, I was thinking, we might see like a 5 or 6 turnover disadvantage. And the thing you're hoping for then is, all right, we got to do that and then some on the glass.
Exactly. Yeah. And I, I think, we talk about statistics all the time, and you see this on TV. And they're talking about during the tournament. They're talking all the time. Michigan State's 330th in 3-point shooting at 31.8% or whatever it is. I'm not sure what it is now, because I think they were okay today too. I think they probably raised their
Yeah,
average a little
they were
bit.
solid.
Yeah, but it goes to show you that they're, just like in baseball, like you have a guy who's hitting 320. Well, if he was hitting 440, and now he's hitting 220, what bat are you facing right now at the end of the season? And that it makes a big difference. And
Yep.
but also it just goes to say that you can have a guy who goes 5 for 5 in a game, and then he's hitless for 5 games in a row. And it's why each game it can be, although we have averages and statistical, core, statistics, water finds its level. However, it is probably fair to say also that when you look at the strength of a team, you expect that strength to be present most of the time. And this is one of those
I
games where it wasn't for Michigan State as far as the rebounding.
I will keep it with the baseball analogies. Jim Leland, the ex-Tiger manager, used to say, it's not, and I've heard Tom Izzo say this too. It definitely applies also to basketball. It's not just who you play, it's when you play them.
Right.
And if you happen to be, as you say, if you're facing a team that maybe has been one thing all year, but lately they're not that, well, you might get that latter version of them rather than the one that's put up the seasonal number,
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know? And that's, yeah, I definitely think that can be true. And then, when you talk about, which we're going to get into rebounding, right? That's next. Um, this is not clearly, I mean, Michigan State just got done putting together 2 fantastic rebounding performances in this tournament.
Yeah.
And so this has not been, oh, they're getting Michigan State on the downside. They've been struggling here. No, 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 no. This was, I would hope, and I expect, was a 1-game anomaly for what we know them to be as a rebounding team. But man, was it bad. And
Yeah. Well,
I give Ole Miss a lot of credit for that. This was not, sometimes we get frustrated and we say, oh, they just didn't work hard enough. I don't think they worked hard enough in the early stages of this game, but man, give Ole Miss credit because I thought in what I was observing, I saw a team that just competed its ass off.
oh yeah, for sure. But I think that's also a testament to the fact that Michigan State didn't respond in kind with,
Yep.
50-50 balls
Yeah.
while going to Mississippi. Well, and that was a lot. I mean, that a lot of rebound is that too, right? It's like getting to the ball that hits the floor first. Who's going to get it
Yeah.
first?
100%.
Yep. What was it? I mean, the rebounding margin was 33-29. Ole Miss had a rebounding margin, which I bet you the season, I think what they averaged -5 on the boards in general.
Yeah,
That's just the
very
global.
rarely, especially against high major opponents. I would guess it almost never happened.
And then the offensive rebounding was just putrid. I mean, Michigan State with 5 offensive boards uh, to Mississippi's 12. So a
Yeah,
20.8% rebounding edge for Michigan offensive rebounding rate for Michigan State, which is maybe the worst they've had this
gotta
season.
be, gotta be.
Could be with 31.5%.
And by the way, the only reason it wasn't even worse was because Michigan State shot the ball so well.
Right, that's true. And later in the game,
because if they had shot 40% instead of 50%, the way that game was being played, I don't think all of a sudden Michigan State's going to be grabbing a bunch more offensive rebounds.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah,
to boost that percentage.
My wife blamed it entirely on she said it was the Tifnots curse. She said, whenever you guys point out rebounding as a huge edge and advantage for Michigan State or a team, or specifically when we mentioned that a team is not good offensive rebounding, they always respond with a good offensive rebounding.
Respectfully,
now,
that is not true.
I know. But for as many times as I get upset when watching the game, so I can let that one slide on her end, that she tolerates me on the with my moans of despair when things happen, like not offensive rebounding or not defensively rebounding. So I get, what more can you say about the boards? I would say this too, and I don't know what Carr was very effective offensive rebounding the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament. There's no question. He didn't. Did he have one this game? Maybe he had one. Yeah, he definitely had one. But I think he's more effective when he's not. Maybe it's like he's a pollen. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just the nature of the way they're playing and the way they're shooting, because when they're shooting threes, they tend to. It's a lot harder to offensive rebound, I think. I don't know. Maybe that's not
for
true.
Michigan State. No, that is. But I think even more than where the shots were being taken from, which can be part of it for sure. I think if you watched, especially the first half, it was all horizontal.
Yeah.
For Michigan State. And not just with, say, 2 guards. It was everybody was kind of out there trying to help break this thing down and not being very successful in doing it. And so I do think that played into it. It's not an excuse. There were, as we kept talking about, I think Ole Miss outcompeted Michigan State.
Yeah, no question.
I think you can fairly say that on the boards, not overall.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I do think the way Michigan State was having to play, especially in the first half, was part of it. They just didn't have a lot of guys around the basket.
Yeah. All right. So third key to the game.
Very disappointing. And I can't decide which end was worse, because they were both horrendous. I mean, to give up a mid-30s rebounding percentage to that team.
Well, that bothered me more. I don't know.
Probably fair, but man, and then Michigan State not doing anything to make up for it on their own end. Yeah. Hard to decide which was worse for me.
All right. So 3-point shooting. 28.6% for Ole Miss in the first half. They finished with 33.3, so they shot a little bit better. They were 9 for 27. Michigan State was 6 for 17, so 35.3%. They're almost 42% in the first half. They only shot 5 in the second half, but they clearly changed things in the second half.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the 3-ball. I think overall, beside Padula, I guess Morrell got a couple too, but he was mainly the problem. I guess Dia had 1 or something, but
I gotta look at their numbers to get this point right, because I think So they being Ole Miss, or I believe they were 5 for 20, 25%, which is great. That's exactly what you would have hoped for and expected from Michigan State. And then from there, 4 for 7.
Yeah.
That was the frustrating thing down the stretch when we referred to one segment where Michigan State finally got a 2-possession lead. They finally got it out to 4. They come right down and Padula hits a 3.
Yeah, right.
And that's what it felt like. Like they had that little run. They got one from, I want to say it was Morrell in the corner.
Yep.
They got one. Padula hit his shot. It was just, They closed strongly. Even take that last heave that didn't really matter out of it. They were still 3 for 6 if you take that one out. Um, but overall, I think when you consider this team was, what were they in those first two tournament games? They were just shy of 50%. I think they were
They were,
19 for 39.
I
Yeah.
think that's right. Yep.
So
That
by
sounds right.
comparison,
They cooled off.
33% is great.
Yeah.
It's just not the standard we're used to for Michigan State.
Yeah. No
So that
question.
was a little bit disappointing, but we talked about, hey, with Padula, tough cover, not just because he makes shots, but the way he gets them off, very hard to contain. And that was just kind of the way it went. I think on the other end, though, you made a really interesting point that, and I think it was twofold. I think in the first half, very clearly, the 3-point shot kept Michigan State alive.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. That little run there where they took it from 8 to 2 in the blink of an eye because they got a Jace Richardson three and a Jaden Akins three was
Right.
massive. It
Hmm.
was massive for their confidence. It was massive for game flow that go in down one possession instead of three. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so that in a game where they just were, everything was horizontal, nothing vertical. The only way you're going to survive that is if you are getting some 3-point production, and they got it. But then in the second half, yeah, totally different game. And the fact that they weren't as dialed in, I don't know what, I got to look at the split. Only 1 for 5.
Yeah. Just 5 attempts.
But the important part was there were only 5 attempts. Why was that? Because Michigan State played downhill. And that's what they needed to do in this game. That was always very obvious. I think in the first half, they needed 20 minutes of play, I think, to get used to what Ole Miss does. Because I don't know how you felt. We knew it, and we knew what it was going to look like to a large extent. And we talked about it. And if we could do that, you bet your bottom dollar, Michigan State as a team knew that. But it's like we talk about all the time. Hey, it's one thing to talk about and even watch on film what Michigan State does with its transition game, but until you face it, you can't know. Well, I think there was something along those lines in that no middle defense, very
Sure.
aggressive defense that Ole Miss played.
Yeah.
And it took Michigan State 20 minutes to settle into that. And then you saw a vastly different game, a vastly more efficient offense from Michigan State as a result, because they did settle in.
Do you think that is that you attribute to the getting the hole so easily, and I shouldn't say easily, but a lot easier than first half they couldn't get anywhere. I don't know if it was. Do you think they just were a little too skittish, and then I mean you can certainly play defense, in which case it makes it look like the easiest thing to do is not to drive, and then you say, well, I'll just settle for jump shots, which if you're a jump shot shooting team like Michigan State, probably not the best strategy, right? If you're
Yes.
and they just
I
sort of
think,
lulled them into sort of they kind of tricked them in that sense, like, well, just take the easy way out, and just like it's almost like giving up and just say, well, I'll just shoot the three then.
yeah, I think there was some settling in the first half, but I also think, I think that Michigan State, we talk about pace of play a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most obvious way that gets expressed, and you see it, is transition. But that's not the whole deal. And it's not even about, hey, we want to have, what was the old Phoenix Suns under D'Antoni rule? 7 seconds or less, I think. 8 seconds or less. They wanted a shot up in 8 seconds or less of possession. It doesn't require that. But what it does require is that the ball and men are moving quickly and with a purpose, and the ball is moving. And I thought Michigan State was much, much better, much more active in that respect. You know what happens when you have that activity level?
Yeah.
You force that team, that defense to move. I didn't think Michigan State made them move as much as they needed to in the first half. And if you make somebody move, you know what'll happen sometimes? You got a guy maybe who's just a hair late or
Right.
just a hair off balance. And a good guard can take advantage of that. And Michigan State did that repeatedly. I think I think they also gained some level of confidence in terms of getting to the rim and trying to finish. Now, Ole Miss had, I don't know what it was. I got to pull up the number here. I know they did register some blocks. What do they have? Well, they only had three. It seemed worse than that to me.
Yeah, I
But
think they got some late there on. They blocked Trey twice, maybe.
well, I think they gained confidence in the second half. We had talked about, and other people had talked about, part of the problem when you're playing Ole Miss is you get the ball in the paint and they're swarming you.
Hmm.
So you've got to be strong with the ball. And then there's also the fact that even though they don't have a ton of size, they are a good shot blocking team. So I think it took some time for Michigan State to settle into it and realize, hey, we got to get to the rim. And screw being worried about getting stripped or getting the shot blocked. We got to go to the rim and force them, either force them to foul us or we got to convert. And Michigan State did a whole lot of both in that
Right.
second half. And it's why maybe the biggest reason why they won this game.
So the fourth key to the game was transition. This is one where Michigan State had an 11-3 edge on fast break points. I think, Padula had that 1-2, and then I think they must have got a free throw at some other point. But for the most part, they got a decent amount going, not against a team that we did not expect really much of anything. So an 8-point edge is actually pretty good, I think,
It
considering
was important.
Yeah,
I
mean, obviously.
said, I recall that I said in our preview, you're not going to get what you're used to getting.
Right. Which is
this
what,
game.
15 to 18 points a game or something?
It's 16 and change.
Yeah, there you go.
You're not going to get that. And they didn't. But I remember saying, this is a game where if Michigan State can just get into double digits, that could be enough. And I didn't think they would get enough chances to do much more than what they did. But it mattered that they converted the ones they did get. To get 11 points in transition, to have an 11-3 edge, which also, by the way, points to the fact that Ole Miss, who's not a transition-based team anyway, but they're a live ball turnover creating team. And
Right.
even though they don't have an emphasis on transition, if they get enough of those, that can turn into a decent amount that could have turned into 8, 10, 12 transition points for them. Didn't happen. So it was both ways. That MSU valued the ball well enough to not allow that to happen against them, and they pushed just hard enough, got just enough done to make a difference. 11-3, very significant edge there.
Well, the fifth and final key, and the one I think you probably could point to as the reason Michigan State won the game, is from the free throw line. Michigan State was 19 for 22 for 86.5%. Ole Miss shot 90%, 9 of 10, but obviously they only had they only 10 attempts, and Michigan State had 19 makes. That was partly a teeny bit due to the end of the game situation where they started fouling, but largely it was just the way Michigan State was playing and they were attacking the rim. And I mean, the way Michigan State, especially in the second half, I mean, the first half they were, well, I guess they're 6 of 8, and then the second half they were 13 for 14. So they're even better. They're 93% from the line in the second half. And that includes some free throws from Cooper, from Fears, from Richardson, from Akins. I think Fiddler had two, maybe. It kind of was everybody. And everybody was, yeah. Oh, he had just that. That's right. He just had the one. But everybody was getting in the act there. And that has not been a strength, the free throw line, the last two games, at least their percentage hitting them. And they need every point they could get this game, obviously. And so that was, I mean, that's obviously the difference. I mean, they 10 more points there, and they won by 3.
Even
6.
before the late fouling, though, I don't think there's any way you could say that free throws were not a major, major factor for Michigan State.
Right.
They were. And, frankly, and I'm not complaining. I thought it was a reasonably well officiated game, but there was some contact in that game at the rim, plays that Michigan State converted that could have been called fouls in other games, would have been. So it could have. I guess what the point I'm making is, I don't think the end game scenario inflated the impact, other than to say, this is the understatement of the night. That's a big component of winning games, right?
Yeah.
You got to lead. You got to close it out. And Michigan State was money. Jaden Akins, Trey Holloman, I think Jeremy also was in that somewhere in the under four, I think. Um, those guys stepped up to the line and hit them. And that's the bottom line. That is if you were we've talked about a number of different aspects of this game, but if you were going to isolate one thing above all others that I think was the difference, and it was one we thought would be a difference, and unlike the rebounding, it proved to be, Michigan State was a lot better at getting to the free throw line, and they weren't better percentage-wise because Ole Miss didn't miss. Say that fast.
Yeah, right.
But MSU just had so many more attempts that it didn't matter. So that was a huge thing, and again, a big benefit of guys attacking,
Yeah.
playing downhill.
And of course, late game too, the fact that they didn't turn the ball over despite the pressure, a team that
Yeah,
pressures, that's kind of what they do to get it inbounding appropriately. Even calling that dumb timeout, that was really stupid. That Jeremy should just toss it into Trey instead they called the timeout, let, uh, Mississippi set up, but it didn't matter in the end. Um, I'm just so
I just
impressed with
think
this
I
team that
just
just kind
think
of,
it was
oh, go ahead.
it was Michigan State did two things that you absolutely have to do in order to win at this stage of this tournament. They played with a ton of guts and toughness, and they also played with poise.
Right.
That is
And that's
sometimes a
something,
very difficult thing to do both of those things at a high
right.
level.
I mean, a lot of the wins Michigan State has had down the stretch in the Big Ten have been not cruising in, but sometimes kind of pretty easy wins,
Yep,
not high pressure, not like one possession.
100%.
This is a one possession game, really,
$100.
the 10, 12 minutes of that second half or whatever it was. And I think, it's reasonable to be a Michigan State fan and say, well, I don't know how they're going to be in this situation because they haven't been in a
Yep.
lot of them. Now, if you're a Michigan fan, you're like, we're always in one possession
We
games.
live in it,
We
right?
always win. That's
Yeah.
where we live, right?
It's I think we talked about this after the Wisconsin game in the tournament, the Big Ten tournament. I remember thinking it if I didn't mention it. Even with the loss, and there were a lot of reasons where that wasn't a big deal, but one advantage to that game is it put Michigan State in a scenario they hadn't been in a lot because you're
Right.
absolutely right. Michigan State, I don't think it really ever got mentioned in the national discourse or even the Big Ten discourse. And we talked about it, but probably not as much as we should. People think about that Purdue team last year as a dominant team in the Big Ten, right?
Right.
They won the league by 3 games, I believe.
Yep.
Well, that's what Michigan State did this year. But you know which of those two teams had the bigger margin of victory, the bigger point differential in the season? Michigan State.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to argue that there was much of any kind of difference in terms of how difficult the league was. You could make an argument that this year it's better,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So this team has actually been winning games in the end pretty easily. I think part of the reason we don't think about it that way, or a lot of people don't, is that they had all those games where they were down at the half and they had to come back. And so they felt like they were very competitive games, and they were. But the final margins were
Yeah.
not all that competitive.
Right.
And so they weren't facing that late game pressure that they were tonight. So I didn't think that Wisconsin game was all bad because it gave them, they didn't get over the hump, but at least they were in it. We saw a game that was like that, the game at Pauley Pavilion, right down to the wire. So they had faced it, but not a lot. And to come through when it matters in that kind of scenario, man, hats off. These guys, they've earned every bit of this. And whatever happens from here, and I'm as optimistic as you can be that they can get this thing to the finish line. I know people love Duke, they love Florida, on and on and on. I think this team can win a national championship. I believe that.
Yeah. I don't think there's a
But
reason you think they couldn't. They got to play well, obviously, but
sure, absolutely.
but that
But
goes without saying. You're not going to beat good teams by playing poorly.
no matter what happens, this has been Such an enjoyable team to watch, such an easy team to watch, to root for. They just embody everything this program has been about for the last 3 decades. And that included tonight a gear that, as we're saying, we hadn't seen from them all that often because, frankly, they haven't been in a position to need it all that often, which is at winning time in a tight game, you step up, you make plays, you deliver. Like I said a while ago, I got to go back to the transcript because and I know we had that listener say that over the last 12 minutes they shot 70 some percent, which I find believable. But
Oh
I'm
yeah, for sure.
interested, especially in like the last 4 or 5 minutes of that game. Were there any possessions or how many possessions there were that they didn't score, either with a bucket from the field or at the line? Because it seemed to me they were just about batting 100, a
I
thousand.
can remember Trey getting blocked, and
Oh,
I don't know
there
what
was
point that
one.
was.
He was trying to pass to Carson. He was
Oh
trying
yeah,
to
that was
dump
a
the ball to
ill-informed,
Cooper.
yeah,
That was it.
ill-advised pass. Yeah,
That was it. That's
in a
the
tough
one.
position.
But I'm going to bet that they were probably, it wouldn't surprise me if, like, on their last 10 possessions, they were batting 900.
So I'm gonna before we go out of here, I'm just gonna mention a couple of the comments on the chat. So from eHearts Hoops 55, love the Tiff Nuts gear from Nudge, is a great sponsor. I have the podcast T-shirt and has been my lucky shirt to wear on game days throughout the season.
Keep
And
wearing
then
it.
yeah, I'm saying keep wearing it, dude. And here's the guy, Big E, Big G, E Hearts. Same here. I wore it the first few games of the tournament and had to throw it on today on the second half when they got down 9. So
Well,
it
let's
took off
not
after.
wait.
Yeah,
Let's not
let's.
wait next time.
I don't want to blame. I don't want to blame Big G for the slow starts here, but it may be your fault this game. So make sure
Yeah.
you be ready on
Sunday, let's get
Sunday.
that shirt dialed up.
And then people mentioning that actually they're not getting rain like we are here. They're getting snow up in the UP. So I don't
Ugh,
know.
poor souls. I feel for you.
Oh yeah, and yeah, that's pretty much it that people are just kind of talking about. And then since we've got a few minutes here, let's talk about, as Izzo would say, the white elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a potential date with Michigan in 2 days for a chance of the Final Four in the Elite Eight. Michigan State's beaten the team twice, and I will once again, I harken back to my college days when I took statistics, and the chance of you beating a team 3 times is, if it's all even, it's 12.5% chance. The chance of beating a team once, then losing once, and then winning once is 12.5%. The chance of right. I mean, you can see where this is
Right.
going.
Yep.
That's assuming all things are even. Now, if I'm a Michigan State fan, which I am, and Michigan State loses to a team by double digits at home, then they go on the road and lose by 20. I'm not feeling confident going and playing this team a third time. Now, that's just me. But I will.
but
But I will. I'll also say this, and then to let you go,
all right.
because I know you're ready. There, it is not. This, and I think Graham Couch described it best. This game, if Michigan ends up being the matchup for a chance to go to the Final Four, the risk reward for a Michigan State fan is much higher than it is for a Michigan fan. Michigan fan loses. First year coach, we won 3 games last year in the Big Ten. Now we're in the Elite Eight. I mean, we just lost to get to the Final Four. Great season. We're super happy. Spring football started. Let's go. If you win, you rub it in Michigan State fans because they care. Michigan State wins this game. You mentioned a Michigan fan, they're like, "Yeah, we made the Elite Eight. What did we talk about? Doesn't matter. I don't care." Right?
All right.
And so it's all risk reward, and so that is why Michigan State fans are so worried. Now, your counter, I'm sure, is, well, that's a team you can beat. Who do you care? What do you care? As
That's
long as you
one.
make the
That's
Final
one
Four.
counter.
Right.
There,
So go ahead.
there are others. One counter is Michigan State's in the head of that team, and they should be.
Yeah.
Because they flat out rubbed their faces in the dirt twice. Those games were not close. Now, that doesn't guarantee the third time it isn't the same deal, but, I've seen a Michigan State team en route to a national title that beat an opponent 4 times in the same year.
Wisconsin.
That's right.
Hello, Badgers.
So this isn't unprecedented, far from it. I saw a Michigan State team that got to a Final Four in 2019, beat that same school 3 times in the same year. So none of this is unprecedented. And the nature, frankly, compared to the 2019 games, this team in the first 2 humiliated Michigan. I mean,
yeah.
big gap. That 2019 team had to keep coming back.
Mhm.
So there's that. Here's the thing though with the fan talk bit that I just want to make sure at least my 2 cents on this gets said on our program. I've said this before. I think I went into a similar bit in the aftermath of the game at Breslin and their abject stupidity and classlessness and all the rest that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
They don't matter. And they don't matter. And why do they not matter? Well, you've kind of touched on part of it. The reason they don't matter is they don't care about this sport. So no matter what would happen in a theoretical game, they don't matter. Their opinions should not matter to you. The things they say, the things they quote unquote think, none of it should matter to you because they are not a serious program. They're not a serious fan base. Now, those things that I'm saying do not mean, I don't mean by that, obviously, well, they can't play the sport of basketball. They're in a Sweet 16 game right now, and they're right in it. They're down 1 at the half to Auburn. But they don't matter. I love the way Michigan State has handled this. And they handled it in their press conference. They handled it in individual interviews, and they handled it after this game tonight when they got asked the question. They said, and I'm paraphrasing, whatever happens, they don't care. If it's Michigan, you think Trey Holloman and Jeremy Fears and those guys are going to come out tight? No, they're going to come out and want to steal the heart out of their chests, and they'll probably do it. If it's Auburn, okay, that's a great opponent you got to play. Doesn't matter. This is the thing that that frustrates me about our fan base at times is the pants wetting associated with people who do not count, who don't matter. You know what this game on Sunday is going to be about? One thing, Michigan State. That's it. Nothing else matters. That's my philosophy. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have a different thought, but that's how I think about it. They don't matter. They don't count. They're not a real basketball fan base. They're not a real basketball school. So who cares what they say, what they think, what they do? What matters is Sunday, you go out. If you're playing them, if you happen to be playing them on Sunday, and you beat the shit out of them again. That's it.
Yeah. And for all those of you who are like, man, it's
and
been a
I'm
while since we
telling
had a good
you,
Rod rant, and there you go.
If that's the matchup, that's what will happen. I'm calling my shot. And I called it in the regular season with those punks too.
Yeah. Oh, so funny. Someone comment, Rod, at least you don't have to listen to Lockdown Ole Miss content ever again. So
that poor guy.
Oh,
well, look, I'll say this.
They were good.
They were, and I didn't expect them to be bad, but honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you, and we don't, other than in Michigan games, we don't do, and maybe a couple of others this year, we don't typically do predictions here. But if I will tell you candidly, if I had been asked to make a prediction in this game, Michigan State was, I believe, a 3.5-point favorite. I would have thought they would cover. I had in my mind, kind of like the New Mexico 7 or 8.
Yeah,
is what I thought.
Sort of like kind of cruising at the end.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be this.
I
really
did too.
didn't. I thought the rebounding and the free throws would make that very difficult for Ole Miss to pull off. But we only got half of that equation.
Well, and I think for me, that's why I was so concerned early in that game because rebounding is a tough thing. I mean, there are times when you can sort of turn it around, but I feel like in some level, especially when the second half wasn't much different, when you're having trouble on the defensive end clearing boards against a team that doesn't offensively rebound well, it just suggests you're just being out physical, and that's a tough thing to sort of just kind of
tone
flip a switch,
set.
right?
Tone gets set.
Yeah, and so
absolutely.
it really had me concerned. I'm like, this is that's one of the edges you thought you had going in the game, and now you don't have that. Yep. And so it's one of the reasons I was very pessimistic about that first half. I need to probably stop being pessimistic about a team that's one of the 8 teams left in the country. and a team that won all but three Big Ten games. I mean, this has been sort
Yeah.
of historic
If
season.
there's ever, if I can't think of another Michigan State team since I've been following them that, and I'm not, by saying this, I'm not saying, oh, I never sweat. I was worried at halftime. I was
Mhm.
worried I was worried when they pushed that lead back to 9 in the second half. We all are. We're all
Yeah.
human beings, right? But I've never seen a Michigan State team that I would compare with this one in terms of its ability to just stay strong, shrug that stuff off, and just go out and keep making plays.
Yeah.
And eventually, when the final whistle blows, they tend to be up. They tend to be
Yeah.
out front.
69 is the magic number this season, apparently. So I guess just put that in your back pocket. So any other parting thoughts? I mean, I
I
guess
think we've I
I
think
think I'll
we've
head
covered
down
it.
and
We got a
we'll
little under 18 minutes left in a tie game between Michigan and Auburn. We find out who Michigan State will face. So we'll all, I'm sure, turn our attention to that. And then Sunday we get to do it all again. But we'll
we
be
don't know when the
back
game is,
tomorrow,
right? Is
right?
it the evening or the afternoon? I don't know when.
I don't believe they've announced the times yet.
I don't know when the times are. I was trying to even find when the times are in general, like if it's like 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock or something, but I feel like they're late on Sundays for some dumb reason.
I think they are. I
They're
think
like not
now
as
they
late on
go
Saturdays and they're later
now
on
they go
Sundays.
prime time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. But you would have, like, I do remember the MSU Duke game in 19, the last time we were there in this round, it being light out, so it probably started like early evening, kind of like tonight did.
Right. I remember walking in there and being
Yep.
surrounded by Duke fans when we were in the arena. So,
Yep.
um, so programming note, I do have another job outside of just doing this podcast, it turns out, in this show. So I'm not sure when the pregame will come up. So just so you're aware, we will get it out as soon as we can. It might be hopefully tomorrow. It might be early Sunday. I don't know. So just make sure if you're not subscribed to the show, make sure you're watching for it. Put the little, if you're new YouTube, click that notification bell. But I'm almost 100% sure we will be here live streaming after the game, whatever the result is. And again, since I have a lost, I will continue wearing the basketball of shame if I lose the rebounding. So that is, I know people were thought I should wear it more. I will just say you, it is shocking how hot that is. It was really hard. I was like boiling. I was like sweating a ton,
Mm,
and I didn't have it on that long. I know you feel terrible for me.
I do.
Yeah,
Just
I don't
awful.
believe that for a second. All right. So until next time, maybe for the last time, before I have to say something different, the Final Four is not on the schedule.
Right.
Go green.